Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of What to Think, VentureBeat's technology news podcast. I'm Dylan Tweeney, and I'm here with Jordan Novett. How's it going, Jordan?
Always crazy, so that's not different. How about you?
The life of a news reporter never slows down, I guess, right?
Absolutely.
Things are good with me. So today's episode is part of our Innovation Engine series, which is sponsored by Pivotal Tracker, and in a little bit, we're going to have my interview with John Purrier, who is the Chief Technical Officer for Automic. But first, Jordan, let's you and I talk about the news.
Sounds good.
Twitter is probably the biggest news story of this week. There's a whole lot going on with Twitter this week. Earnings is kind of the biggest or the most recent thing, but I think the biggest thing is probably this news that this algorithmic timeline is coming. So fill the good people in on that, Jordan.
Yes. Well, let me just preface it by saying that Twitter has not been kind enough to roll out the feature to me yet. So I only know what I'm talking about based on what Twitter has said about this.
They are certainly taking their time about rolling it out. Not everybody
Seriously.
has it. Okay, so the idea is they're going to put the most popular or the biggest tweets at the top out of chronological order, right?
I think it's going to be personalized, so there'll be tweets that they think are the most relevant to you as one individual user.
Oh, just like Facebook does.
That's the thing. It is a lot closer to the big brother of Facebook. When I say big brother, I mean it is the big brother of Twitter and social media. And when I say big, I mean 5 times the user base of Twitter. And so Twitter is doing something here that brings it a lot closer to its big competitor.
Yeah, because Facebook has for a long time been doing this kind of algorithmic, here's what we think you're most likely to be interested in thing. But a lot of core Twitter users really wigged out about this. They're like, oh, this is the death of Twitter. I'm going to stop using it. It sucks. I think that's kind of overblown, actually, because they already have this while you were away feature. If you don't check Twitter very often, the first few tweets at the top of the timeline are already what they think you're going to be most interested in. So this is just sort of extending that a little bit, it seems like.
That you could say, but I hate it. I say I don't want to see it. I exit out. And I say, no, I did not like it. And I don't want to see this in my timeline. And I would say it's about 70-30 from people I've talked with about this who don't like while you're away. Now, I was just talking with someone who has gotten the feature rolled out to their timeline, and he said to me, well, it isn't something that I noticed because I am constantly checking my timeline, and maybe that's telling. Maybe they haven't made it so that you only see a few tweets that are out of order. So I would say let's reserve judgment.
Yeah, I agree. I think that kind of makes sense. I mean, for people who check Twitter less, an algorithmic feed may be ideal. But the power users, the people who are most likely to be outraged about this, are also the ones who are most likely to be checking Twitter constantly or just living on it, right? So maybe it won't screw things up as much for them. Who knows?
I'm nervous. I'm not excited about getting it.
Well, I have to say, Twitter is going to need some help because even though its revenues were decent in its earnings report this quarter, its member growth is basically zero. So
not good.
Not good. A lot of people are starting to wonder, where is this company going and can it actually continue to thrive long term, especially since it's, as you point out, such a distant second to Facebook in size.
And when was the last time you heard about LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter user numbers going down? This is unprecedented. And one way to look at it is this a turning point for Twitter in terms of its future potential? It's not a good sign to see it, regardless of how successful this is. If people aren't flocking to it, then that's really bad. That's troublesome.
Good. Totally agree. Well, let's talk about another company that's sort of struggling with things a little bit this week, and that's Zenefits. Their CEO and founder, Parker Conrad, just resigned quite abruptly. It was announced by the company, by their COO, David Sachs, who took over as the CEO, saying that basically the company's been moving way too fast and playing fast and loose with insurance regulations, not getting licensing or accreditation that it needed in various states in order to be able to sell insurance. And this is, in fact, a criticism that people have leveled at Zenefits in the past.
It's clear David Sachs knows he has a challenge on his hands, but it doesn't look like he's particularly scared. He basically came out with a large set of positive statements about where the company can go.
Yeah.
And the thing that jumped out to me right away, that he has values, 3 values for the company to follow going forward. He says, effective immediately. This company's values are 1, operate with integrity. 2, put the customer first. And 3, make this a great place to work for employees. If employees feel like they're not following the laws, even though they might be meeting the needs of their supervisors, then that's a problem. And I think the fact that they included the employees here is reflective of the desire to be legit and above board. It's like the adult is finally in charge over there.
The adult is in the room and in charge. That's probably a good sign. I mean, let's be clear. The business of Zenefits is it's an insurance broker, right?
Yeah,
I mean, they offer HR-style benefits for free, but where they make money is by hooking up their clients with insurance. So they're an insurance broker. The problem with their model is that insurance is a highly, highly regulated industry. You and I can't just go out and start selling insurance in most states. There might be a few where we can, but it's quite regulated, which means if you just charge in and start selling insurance without being licensed, sort of Uber style, you're going to run into trouble.
Yeah, and now we understand that there is a lot of money that they need to have from venture capitalists to pay for all those lawsuits, just like Uber. I would say, though, going forward, they are looking like a company that's going to grow a lot and not be flying by night all the time. It felt like they have so many salespeople who are trying to grow the business.
Yeah.
But I had the feeling that it wasn't always in the best way. They have always had more salespeople than a higher percentage than a lot of other companies. And sure, it's about execution, but I feel much better about that company knowing that Parker Conrad, a controversial figure, is gone.
I agree. I think it's a good move, but I think it's too soon to say that, they're out of the woods or that they're going to grow a lot. I think they may have done serious damage to themselves already, and it's too soon to say whether this is going to be sufficient to get them back on the right track. We'll see how those lawsuits go and how they fare. And
the other thing I would just say is they are addressing this in a way that's much better than Theranos. They are looking much more proactive and
that is true.
Responding to criticism very quickly.
Theranos has been very slow to respond in a very transparent way. They've been quite opaque about all the tests and FDA investigations that are going on.
Same thing with Hampton Creek, right? The CEO hasn't been changed.
Well, that's true, but Hampton Creek, I think, was, first of all, on the lab testing, is much less serious allegations than what were going on at Theranos. And then in their little fight with the egg board, they actually won that. They won the right to call their mayonnaise mayo, even though it's not got any eggs in it, and good for them.
But they were just so difficult to work with when you ask them anything. And here you have a legitimate, well-known executive coming on and saying, hey, we're going to be legitimate going forward.
Okay, well, noted. Jordan likes that.
Yes.
Let's just talk very briefly about one quite amusing kerfuffle, and that is Marc Andreessen talking about colonialism, a topic that he later admitted he knew absolutely nothing about. Really quite amusing. It all came about because Facebook was trying to roll out Facebook Basics, which is a free internet service in India. And the Indian regulators turned it down because they said, you can't do that. It does not meet our net neutrality requirements. And Marc Andreessen just fired off a tweet saying, yeah, well, it's really stupid to deny internet to people who really need it. And he made some offhand comment about how anti-colonialist policies have really been hurting India, which was a really stupid thing to say.
Why stop now was how he ended the tweet.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, thank you very much, Mr. White American billionaire. Please come over and tell us how to run our country so that we can thrive.
So he deleted the tweet right away.
Yes, he did. And Mark Zuckerberg distanced himself immediately from that far as he could. He's like, this is not what we stand for at all.
You can imagine what the next board meeting will be like with Marc Andreessen just sitting there on his phone, not paying attention. I don't think it's going to be a positive meeting when
probably
he
not.
Walks into the room, though.
I'm sure Andreessen is getting an earful from the many, many, many Indian Americans in the Silicon Valley who no doubt have opinions on this as well and who are in his circle.
I don't know what to think. I thought maybe he would step down from the board. I thought there would be
He's not going to do that over a tweet, but he did apologize, and he's clearly been told that was not the right thing, and in a rare case he actually saw the light.
I wonder how long Silicon Valley will be thinking about this. And it seems like it could be, though, it's very offensive, the next little scandal that will be forgotten about within 1 or 2 weeks. It's sad, but
yeah, undoubtedly.
I'm expecting that.
I imagine news of the stock market will quickly erase any memories of Marc Andreessen's ill-advised tweets. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for news. We're going to go to our guest in just a moment. But first, a message from our sponsor. The What to Think Innovation Engine podcast is brought to you by Pivotal Tracker. It's an agile tool with a simple drag-and-drop interface and structured workflow to help developers, product managers, and designers build and manage better software one story at a time. You can go to pivotaltracker.com and sign up for a 30-day free trial and start delivering better software now. Now let's go to my guest, John Purrier. He's the Chief Technical Officer for Automic. John, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So you are brand new to Automic. As we record this podcast, you've been there for all of maybe 6 weeks. So tell me a little bit about what you did before and what brought you to Automic.
I've been involved with cloud for about the last 6 or 7 years. I ran the engineering team at the Rackspace Cloud. And as part of that, we built Swift, which is the object storage system in OpenStack. Of course, I was part of the team that founded OpenStack with Rackspace and NASA, and was involved with the governance of that open source project for several years. And since then, I stood up the HP public cloud. I went to a startup called AppFog, and AppFog was a platform as a service company based upon Cloud Foundry. We sold AppFog to CenturyLink about 2.5 years ago, and I was the CTO of what we called the Innovations Lab at CenturyLink, doing advanced R&D on cloud topics such as Docker, Kubernetes, Mesos, etc. So we did a lot of very early work with Docker as part of the Docker community, and actually formed several open source projects, the biggest of which is called Panamax, which is a visual tool for developers building containerized applications.
Okay, so you've been really in a lot of the kind of transformative technologies that I think are going on in enterprise IT in the past few years, the sort of move to containerization, the whole kind of cloud-based infrastructure taking over, not just as an option for IT to deploy a few applications in the cloud, but as an actual foundation of many of the infrastructures that they build and depend on.
Yeah, that's correct. And one of the reasons that I came to Automic is really to continue that journey. Because I see right now we're at the cusp of something really interesting where enterprise IT is being transformed. These technologies that we're talking about, they're not mainstream now, but they're becoming mainstream. And over the next several years, I think that we're going to see a lot of new and innovative ways of transforming enterprise data centers, hybrid cloud usage, and so on.
For the benefit of people who may not have heard of Automic, what does Automic do?
At its core, it's an automation company. And we really focus on 3 different areas. Continuous operations, we do workflow automation, we do release automation, really targeted at the operational part of the business. Continuous delivery, really a DevOps type tooling where we can take code from your CI system through the various environments into production. And then really continuous deployment where we can actually take an application and deploy it to as many endpoints as the business requires with zero downtime upgrades. So
it's not really a startup though, right? Automic, in fact, predates a lot of these technologies that we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Automic was known as UC4. It's about 20 or 25 years old. So there's a lot of institutional knowledge baked into the software. And it really grew out of being an enterprise company, increasingly is moving more and more towards both on-premises and cloud-based delivery.
I mean, you worked at, Rackspace, which is a medium old company. I guess I don't want to, they're not like the newest of the new, but they're certainly in the newer generation of data centers and cloud platforms. Then you did a startup, right? And now you're coming at it from a company that has its roots deep in the enterprise. Are you seeing different perspective on enterprise IT coming from that direction than from the sort of more startup-y world?
Absolutely, right? So my background goes even back further. I started at IBM. I was at Microsoft for 14 years and built Exchange Server. So I have, kind of deep roots in enterprise software. Mm-hmm. My time at CenturyLink, I actually spent part of my time helping the internal IT teams on their, quote, journey to the cloud, mm-hmm. right? So it was very, very much how do we take legacy IT enterprise systems and take them into the cloud in kind of a logical way. So I think that there's actually two worlds that are really coming together, and this is what I find very interesting. You do have that kind of startup, cloud native, IaaS, PaaS, cloud hybrid thing on one side. And then you have, kind of your traditional guys that are running data centers. They've got a lot of mission critical applications, a lot of complicated applications that they need to have automated through, workflow tools and so on and so forth. Increasingly, we're seeing that IT in the enterprise needs to deliver both sides of those equations to the business.
And those infrastructure guys who are responsible for keeping things up and running haven't traditionally been too favorably disposed towards the sort of crazy innovations that are coming out of startup land, right? I mean, Docker really, I think only in the last year or so, for instance, has become mm-hmm. taken more seriously as a tool for deployment as opposed to a tool that is just used by development teams to be sort of a quick and dirty way of rolling things out on a small scale. But that's shifting now.
Absolutely, right? The operation guys, the traditional guys, are correct in their view, right? They have to keep these things up and running 24/7, 365. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, businesses are realizing that if they don't increase their velocity and, speed up their, time to customer interaction with their software, they're going to lose. It's a really interesting dynamic right now, and trying to figure out, how you blend that is, I think, the challenge that we have.
So tell us a little bit about OpenStack. Are you still involved with OpenStack?
Not as much as I used to be. In the early days, very involved. My team basically delivered the object storage system into the original versions, Swift, and I was on the policy board and all that. Through my career when I went to HP and stood up an OpenStack cloud, very involved with the community. And then when I went to AppFog, and we basically shifted the business to be polyglot public paths based on Cloud Foundry, still involved with OpenStack, but more involved with the Cloud Foundry community at that point. Now I'm very involved and getting more involved on kind of the DevOps communities out there and so on and so forth, and trying to blend PaaS, IaaS, and traditional workload automation and release automation.
What's the standing of the various open standards efforts in the DevOps world? It's had sort of a bumpy past, not necessarily lived up to all the hype or all the hopes of kind of a universal interoperable platform that I think OpenStack was touted as in the early days, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. In the early days, my personal goal was to provide universal interoperability and federation of clouds. Mm-hmm. So the idea, right, was that, we could stand up 1,000 OpenStack clouds, and in aggregate, they would compete very nicely against Amazon Web Services and other options. And
that's a beautiful dream.
I think the dream has really been derailed, frankly.
Why is that? What happened?
It turned out to be a much harder problem than we thought it was originally. Mm-hmm. And I think that the lack of being able to corral the community towards cooperating at that level has really made it very tough.
Maybe part of it, too, is just the overwhelming dominance of Amazon. I mean,
they are a machine. You have to be impressed.
One of the themes that got this particular series in the VentureBeat podcast started was my interest in figuring out what people really meant about a platform. So when you talk about platforms or platform as a service, does that have a particular specific meaning for you? What does it take to qualify as a platform, apart from your marketing department deciding that they're going to call you a platform?
Yeah, exactly. And we call ourselves a platform. to me, platform as a service is really, I think of Cloud Foundry and I think of OpenShift, right? As, kind of the dominant instantiations of that. Now, like I said, we made a business out of Cloud Foundry and we ran it in public cloud space. We were on multiple clouds and we federated. And we realized that from a developer perspective, it's a super tool, right? And if you're using a service like a public version of Cloud Foundry, it really works well because, you have the unseen folks doing the operational piece on the back end. Once you try to bring that into an enterprise, you run into some really interesting issues. The fact of the matter is that PaaS is not no ops, right? Somebody has to keep the platform up and running. That is a non-trivial task. The thing that really has attracted me to come and work at a company like Automic is that traditional PaaS is very opinionated, right? So the pipeline, the monitoring, all this stuff is really kind of out of control of both the developers and the operational guys. So if you're going to adopt one of these platforms, you're also adopting their view of how software is pushed down the pipeline. With Automic, we do very similar things, right? We take code, we create environments, we push it down the pipeline, we deploy it, with no downtime. But we are an orchestration layer over perhaps existing systems that the operational folks are very familiar with already.
Okay, so you're adding back the kind of operational controls that we're missing.
Yep.
Or standardizing them in a way.
Right. It allows you to do things like no open source project or company can do it all, right? If you take a look at enterprises, Fortune 1000 enterprises, let's say, and you take a look at their data centers, they have a ton of stuff, right? They have their own databases, even if they're, all running Oracle or SAP or something, they have their own way of doing it.
Yeah, more likely than not, it's incredibly heterogeneous. You're going to have many different kinds of databases and many different kinds of code bases running on top of them.
Exactly, and it's not realistic to say that there's a single platform that can encompass all that and run it.
Okay, so you come in as sort of the glue or sort of I was going to call you duct tape, but maybe you would object to that. But the duct tape that helps stick some of that together and automate some of it.
I love duct tape, right?
Okay.
That's great. Yeah, we really are the orchestration layer across the top that allows the business to maintain their investment, right? We're not hey, you have to immediately move to cloud native development styles.
Right.
So you can maintain your investment, you can do what you do. We make your business more efficient at that layer. And then as you want to add in these more dynamic polyglot, development languages and platforms, we can bring that in and orchestrate that as well.
Let's back up a little bit and sort of take a bigger picture view. I'm interested in what it is about containerization that has made it so big in the last couple of years. Why is it so much the Docker's moment right now?
That's a great question. So as you know, platform as a service, all of them from day one has been containerized, right? So it just was not, kind of published. So with Cloud Foundry in the early days, we had something called a Warden. That's how we kind of sliced things up when we deployed applications. And OpenShift had their own thing. And of course, .cloud, right, had their thing. And they realized that their thing was actually much more valuable than the platform as a service that they were actually trying to sell. So they, kind of split Docker out. Why is it taken off like this? Two reasons, I think. One is the kind of the obvious one, which is, look, from a developer standpoint, if I can build something locally and test it and make sure that it's what I want, and that exact same image is going to get deployed in production, then my surface area for bugs and so on and so forth is much less, right? I mean, that's a beautiful thing.
Is it a packaging question? Because that capability was sort of, containerization, as you mentioned, has been around for a while. It was always sort of implicit in the...
Yeah, and I think that part of it is packaging. Part of it is because it's lightweight, right? Much more lightweight than spinning VMs. But I think that the part that some people are missing in this equation is the collaborative piece. The idea that you have that Docker repositories, right, that you can publish, that you can make them public, that you can collaborate on, I think is a very powerful part of this story.
That's interesting. So you're actually getting the ability for people to work together on something easily is really key.
That's right. And it's very much like the open source model. Let's collaborate to make this thing better, and the sum is more than the parts. So
that's interesting. And open source, I mean, has very deep roots in the enterprise IT world in the last, I would say, 15, maybe even 20 years. It's really become a dominant force.
Absolutely, right? Things like GitHub, and I know you've done a podcast with those guys.
Yeah, I was talking with their new director of product management, Kakal Srivastava, and she was great. They've participated a lot in the open source world. I mean, coming out of open source, of course, with Git, but also giving back and sort of creating their open source editing environment, Atom, doing all kinds of other stuff.
GitHub is awesome, but the interesting thing there is that provides a platform for collaborative development.
Yes.
And that's where I see, Docker is capturing the imagination because you can do that kind of collaborative development and publication. It makes it very easy for developers to then assemble applications from components.
Cool. Well, so tell me about your plans at Automic now that you're ensconced as the CTO. What are you going to do?
Automic has a really good business right now. Very solid business, very profitable. It's been around for a while, as you mentioned. It has a really great set of customers. So the first thing is don't screw it up. Yeah. I'm very interested in kind of taking the world of Automic with workload automation and release automation, this DevOps story that we have for the operational piece of the business, and really extending it toward the developer, right? Really kind of facilitating this merge of the two worlds that we talked about earlier, of the developer-centric cloud-native piece and the traditional on-premises IT piece, and doing it in such a way that we can really expose, kind of governance, control, and insight to the business. So I think that's kind of the first step.
How do you make that exciting to guys who are in a way that, something like GitHub is exciting to them because they can easily collaborate and see what their colleagues are working on, or Docker is exciting because it's just so simple, right? So how do you make governance and oversight exciting to these guys?
Governance and oversight are never going to be exciting, right?
Right, unless your job is on the line, right? But yeah.
Exactly. But it's necessary.
Yeah.
Right? For the developers and really for the ops guys, what we are going to be able to do is enable them to bring in these newer technologies and do it in a very thoughtful way. Let's say you want to bring in Docker. Well, Docker right now is a tool. I was talking to a friend of mine over lunch the other day, and I said, you know what Docker is doing? Basically, Docker is creating paths from the inside out, right? So we always had kind of this containerized engine and a runtime inside of our paths, but now we're starting with that, and we're building all the other stuff around it.
Yeah.
Right? And as the Docker ecosystem and community, gets richer and richer and richer, this idea that you need an orchestration layer is going to be very, very evident. And that's where we're going to play.
Cool. We're just about out of time, so I think we're going to have to wrap this up. But John Purrier, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us on VentureBeat's What to Think podcast.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, it was likewise. And best of luck in the new job. We'll catch up with you soon, I hope.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, take care. You've been listening to What to Think, VentureBeat's technology news podcast. As always, you can find us online at VentureBeat.com. Go look for us, if you haven't already, on iTunes or in SoundCloud. Just search for What to Think and click the subscribe button. We will thank you so much. I'm Dylan Sweeney.
And I'm Jordan Novett. See you later.
It's been great hanging out with you guys.